Lesson 10-2 continued, and we are dealing with radical expressions. We're simplifying radical expressions. So this is day 2. Today's objective is to divide radical expressions. Yesterday we were simplifying and multiplying. Today we do division. Okay, so here's something that you've got to know. Just like we said yesterday, kind of the standard with radical expressions is you never leave a perfect square under a radical sign. Not allowed to do that, okay? Also, you may never leave a radical in a denominator of a fraction. That is never, ever allowed. Radical sign may never be left in a denominator. If that happens, you must do something called rationalize it to get rid of it, because it would be irrational if the radical was left in the denominator. And it's really not hard, it's just something that you've got to be aware of that must happen. So I see radical 12 over radical 5. And I definitely cannot leave radical 5 there. So here's what you do. You multiply top and bottom by radical 5. Now, first of all, what does radical 5 over radical 5 equal? 1. So I'm multiplying by a 1. So I'm not changing the value of it at all. I'm just kind of manipulating it to put it in a proper form. Okay, so we're not changing the value. I'm multiplying by 1. So here's what's going to happen with that. When you have two radicals being multiplied, remember from yesterday, you multiply what's inside. So the top would be radical 60, and the bottom would be radical 25. Well, crazy thing, what's radical 25 simplified? 5. Yeah, so you see what we're doing there? You're removing the radical sign by multiplying the thing by itself, which would cause the number inside to become a perfect square and simplify out. So that happens. Now with 60, are there any perfect squares in 60? And the answer is yes, 4 times 15. And then from yesterday, let's do it like this. See if we're to this point. What would the 4 come out as? 2. So I'm going to write 2 radical 15 over 5. Now I want you to understand the number under the radical cannot simplify with anything there because it's under a radical. The 2 and 5, if for some strange reason they would simplify, then you would do it. Otherwise, that's your final answer. 2 radical 15 over 5. All right, questions about that? So, radical 3 over radical 8. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by what? Radical 8. So the top would become radical 24, and the bottom would become radical 64. The 64 is the easiest. What's square root of 64? Okay, 8. So there we succeeded in getting rid of the radical in the denominator. The 24, you break it apart, perfect square and another factor, which would be 4 times 6. The 4 would come out as a 2. 2 radical 6 over 8, and I am not done because of the 2 and 8 being able to reduce. So that would become a 1, and that would become a 4. Simplified answer, radical 6 over 4. Question about that? All right. Does everybody have the red written? Okay. Let's keep going and see what other kinds of crazy things might happen. All right, radical 5 over radical 2. What am I going to multiply top and bottom by? Yep. Radical 2, yep. So radical 10 over radical 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Now, does radical 10 simplify in any way?
2 and 5.
But are they perfect squares? Nope. So radical 10 over 2, and you're done. Okay, now let's do some looking here at this next one. They're going to get a little more complicated, okay? Everybody good with what we've done so far? Okay, so the next one is square root of 11y over square root of 27. And you know, I could multiply top and bottom by 27, but you know what? I think I see something in 27 that might help us out a little bit here. And I probably could have done it on a couple of them up there, but 27 is a little bit bigger number. So let's do this. Let's think about this one's radical 11y. Nothing's going to change there. But this one is 9 times 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if I do that, that stays radical 11y. What's the bottom become? 3 radical 3. So really, I only need to multiply by not square root of 27, but just square root of 3. Do you see how I made that a little simpler then? And not getting into such big numbers? So my top would become radical 33y, and the bottom becomes 3 radical 9. Well, the top's going to stay radical 33y, but the bottom is going to become 3 times 3, or 9. And that would be the simplified answer. Questions about that? Okay, next. Notice how square root of 32 over t to the 4th looks different. Do you see how it looks different? It's got the division bar inside the radical. Well, that's no big deal. All that means is we're going to add a step here, and we're going to say radical 32 over radical t to the 4th, and that's totally equivalent to it. And the way that I see it, radical t to the 4th is a perfect square. I don't have to rationalize it. It is just t squared. Now what about that 32? Is there anything in that 32 that maybe can simplify?
4 and 8.
I could do 4 and 8, but let's see if we can think of a bigger perfect square. 16 and 2 would save me a little bit of work if I went 16 and 2. Now, if I did do 16 and 2, the 16 would come out as a what? 4. So 4 radical 2 over t squared, and that is it. Questions about that? Okay. Anybody still writing any of the blue? Yes.
I get confused. Why can't I use again?
All right, next. Radical 27 over m to the 5th. So again, I would highly recommend splitting that apart. So I'm going to go down here like this, and I'm going to go radical 27 over radical m to the 5th. Now my problem here is that m to the 5th is not a perfect square. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of what I did yesterday. I'm going to leave the top alone for just a second. I'm going to say this is m to the 4th times m. Do you remember doing that yesterday? Okay, so I guess at this point, I'm going to go ahead and let's deal with the 27 while I'm at it. What perfect square is a factor in 27? 9. So that one's going to have a 9 and a 3. Now, my m to the 4th is going to come out as what? m squared, and I've still got the radical m. Okay, now, what do I have to multiply top and bottom by to rationalize that denominator? Jared. Radical m. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple things here. As I'm multiplying across the top, this 9 is going to come out as a 3, and inside I'm going to have radical 3m. On the bottom, I'm going to have m squared times radical m squared. Think about that for a minute, because I've got m times m, right? Okie doke. Now, the top is about as low as it's going to go. The bottom, I've got m squared times, what's the square root of m squared? M. So together, 3 radical 3m, and that's going to be m cubed. Any thoughts about that?
It has to be an absolute value.
I'm going to put that in an absolute value just to be on the safe side. Yes. Yes. So 3 radical 3m over absolute value of m cubed. Okay. All right. Next, we are going to multiply 2 radicals together that are fractional. So I'm going to go this route. 7 times 5 on the top is 35. 2 times 3 is 6 on the bottom. So radical 35 over 6. Now split it apart. Radical 35 on the top. Radical 6 on the bottom. Anything simplify out of that 6? Not a thing. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical 6. So sadly, it is radical 210 over what? Radical 36, which would be radical 210 over 6. That one just had nothing to simplify out of it. That was it. All right, last example, radical 9ab over 4ab to the 4th. So I'm going to split it apart first. All right, so this one is radical 9ab over 4ab to the 4th. So instead of trying to deal with all of that, I really believe you'd be better off simplifying what's inside of there first. Like, for example, the a's should just cancel out. And the b and b to the 4th, I can take this one out completely, and that would make this one become a 3. So therefore, I have radical 9 on top and radical 4b cubed on the bottom. Okay, so what we did with that earlier is take the bottom and go 4b squared and b, because there's a leftover. The top, what's the top going to be? 3. So let's just do that. Okay, now the bottom, the 4 is going to come out as a 2. The b squared is going to come out as a b, and there's going to be a b left in the radical, which we know you're not allowed to do. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical b. And then what will happen is the top is 3 radical b. The bottom is 2b radical b squared. And then last but not least, the top is 3 radical b, and the bottom, well, that b squared will come out as what? A b. So it's 2 times b times b. So what should I write down there? 2b squared. And nothing cancels because the top one has the b under the radical and the bottom